إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وتابعين لهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to be starting a new series of lessons, and we're going to be starting the Kitab Al-Waraqaat by Abi Ma'ali Al-Juwayni rahimahullah ta'ala. And this new book is a relatively new book to a lot of you, and there's a few reasons why I wanted to teach this book. First reason being is a lot of the questions and a lot of the interaction with yourselves, I realize there's a lot of deficiency in this science, and a lot of the understanding of the Masail of fiqh revolves around understanding usul al-fiqh. These are the tools that allow you to understand the subject of fiqh and derive rulings that are correct and accurate. So that's the first reason, is because of a need that I sought in the students yourselves. Number two, as a caveat, just in advance, as a disclaimer, this subject is slightly technical. It's very technical. You'll find ourselves sometimes in maybe the span of 15-20 minutes, we're just discussing one definition. We're going back and forth. And certain aspects of the definition, we're trying to make it better, make it worse, and drop things and remove things. And it's a very technical science. So if it's something that you're not used to, you might find it difficult. But don't let that be something that puts you away from the science. Knowing the importance of the science, don't allow that to push you away from learning the science. That's number two. And number three, this science is a science that's also very practical. Just like the science of tajweed, you can learn all of the rules of tajweed that you want. Ahkam al-nun sakina wa tanween, mudud, all of these rulings. But if you don't practice them, there is no purpose behind it. Likewise, ilm al-fara'id. You can know all of the rules of inheritance, but if you don't practice it, there is no benefit that comes out of that science. Likewise, usul al-fiqh is a ilmun amali. It's a science that is very practical. You can learn all of the rulings of usul al-fiqh, but if you don't apply it and you don't practice it, there's very little benefit from learning the science. If it's just to engage your mind and make you more smart and make you think better, that's all you're going to get at the end of it if you don't put it into practice. So it's a very practical science. So I will try my best, inshallah ta'ala, to give you as many examples as I can to make it more relatable and practical. Number four, this science at the same time is a science that, again, a lot of you might not be accustomed to. So it's a science that is difficult, but I will try my best to simplify it. And understand this, you will not be able to become an expert by the end of this book. Al-Waraqaat is only a beginning. It's the first step. By the end of this book, you cannot sit and say, I'm going to now open a chair where I'm going to give fatwa. Bismillah, who has a question? And you start giving fatwa. And you say, I think the ruling in this opinion, on this matter, is X, Y, and Z. How do you... Al-Am, يفيد الأمر يفيد الوجوب. خلاص, no. Just because you've learned certain things from the science does not mean you can apply it and become a mufti right away. It's a science that will enable you to understand the working and the thinking of scholars, but it's not going to make you a mufti. You're not going to become a mufti by the end of it. So don't have that desire. And the last one is, like I mentioned, the science and this book is a beginning and the key to the science. Don't let it be that you study the science and think you've done all of usul al-fiqh. And there are some gaps you might have in your understanding of usul al-fiqh if this is the first time you're understanding it and studying the science. And which is why the aim of this book is not to make you an expert. It's to give you an overview picture of usul al-fiqh, to give you an understanding of it, but that's it. Don't expect anything more than that. There are the malaka, as they call it, which is the skill set of developing and extracting rulings, comes about through years of practice. Also, just because you see something in the book, which is a formula, 1 + 1, does not always mean 2. Because sometimes you might find a principle, and you might apply it onto an evidence. And you might think the answer is what you think, it's wajib or it's haram or it's makruh, but that's not the final ruling. There's qara'in, there's external factors that may affect and change the ruling. So don't rush to give rulings or understand rulings based on a few principles that you've understood from this book. So give it its time, understand the principles. We'll try to implement as many of them as we can, give you practical examples, but this is the beginning. Don't try to understand rulings and then it doesn't make sense and think maybe there's something wrong with Imam Shafi'i and Imam Malik in the way that he deduced the ruling. And as a benefit, Imam Ahmed rahimahullah ta'ala was asked, and he was asked, should a person give fatwa if he's memorized 100,000 ahadith? And he said no. What if he's memorized and he was asked 2,000 ahadith? He said no. He said, so 200,000 ahadith? He said no. 300,000 ahadith? He said no. When he was asked maybe 4,000 ahadith, he said arju, I hope. He didn't say yes, he said maybe. At that point, you have a starting point. So just because you know usul al-fiqh and you know a few evidences, you memorize the Quran and you memorize the hadith, it doesn't make you a mufti right away. Just a few points of disclaimer, inshaAllah ta'ala. As a show of hands, before I begin, so I know the level that I want to go with, who here has studied usul al-fiqh before? Whether from Waraqaat or a different book? Good, just a few people. Okay, so I'll try my best to simplify it as much as possible, inshaAllah ta'ala. So the book is called Al-Waraqaat. The book is called Al-Waraqaat. And the author of the book is Abdul Malik ibn Abdullah ibn Yousaf, and he's known as Imam al-Haramain. He was a man who was Shaykh al-Shafi'iyya fi Naysabur. Naysabur is modern day Iran, Uzbekistan, that area, Naysabur, that area. And he was the Shaykh of the people of the Shafi'i madhab up there. One time he came to do Hajj, and he came to Mecca and Medina. And he stayed in Mecca and Medina for a number of years. And they say he stayed there for 4 years, between Mecca and Medina. And when he stayed in Mecca and Medina for 4 years, he became an imam. Some of the people, they say he used to lead the people in the salah. He led the people in the salah in Mecca and in Medina, and that's why he was given the name Imam al-Haramain, the Imam of the two Haram, Mecca and Medina. And some of the scholars say no, he never led the salah. He stayed there for 4 years, but he became so famous in that area. People started coming and asking him questions that he became the Imam of Mecca and Medina in terms of people turning back to him for questions. So he was called Imam al-Haramain for that reason. Now, to give you an understanding, Imam al-Haramain, Abi Ma'ali al-Juwayni, he's not a normal man when it comes to usul al-fiqh. He's an imam. In the science of usul al-fiqh, the man is a giant. And Imam al-Haramain, he's written not only one book, but a number of books in usul al-fiqh in his lifetime. One of them is Al-Waraqaat. And Al-Waraqaat, the one that we're about to inshallah tackle, is a beginner's book. Is the first stage, a beginner's book of a student of knowledge when they study usul al-fiqh. The second and slightly more advanced book of Abu Ma'ali al-Juwayni is a kitab called Al-Talkhis. Al-Talkhis, the summary. And this book is a summary of another book called Al-Irshad, by an imam called Al-Baqillani. Al-Baqillani is another imam. He had a kitab called Al-Irshad. Imam Abi Ma'ali al-Juwayni summarized it in a kitab called Al-Talkhis, the summary. And that's an intermediate book of usul al-fiqh written by the imam. Then Imam Abi Ma'ali al-Juwayni has the biggest book, or the most comprehensive book that he's written about usul al-fiqh, called Al-Burhan. Al-Burhan, which as-Subki, he called it Lughzul Ummah, the riddle and the puzzle of this ummah. Al-Burhan is his masterpiece when it comes to usul al-fiqh. And the reason I mention this is if you want to summarize and you want to specify the opinions of the imam regarding usul al-fiqh, we're not going to use Al-Waraqaat as a reference point, or Al-Talkhis, the second book. The final book, the comprehensive book that he's written, that is his final opinion regarding issues of usul al-fiqh. And the imam, to give you an understanding, he is one of the teachers of the Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, Muhammad ibn Muhammad ibn Muhammad Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, who wrote the Kitab al-Mustasfa in Usul al-Fiqh. And this book, al-Mustasfa, is a book where a lot of the latecomers, they relied on this book of al-Mustasfa. Who was it written by? Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali. His teacher is Imam al-Haramain, our author. So his teacher is Imam al-Haramain. And later, Ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi rahimahullah ta'ala, he came and he removed some of the kalam and mantiq from al-Mustasfa, and he wrote his kitab, Rawdatul Nadhir wa Junnatul Munadhir. A 3-volume, around 3-volume books today, or 5 volumes you can even find it in, called Rawdatul Nadhir by Ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi, the Hanbali scholar who wrote the Kitab al-Mughni. He removed some of the ilm al-kalam from it. He removed some of the mantiq from it, and he made it, summarized it. And a lot of the scholars worked on Rawdatul Nadhir, like Najmuddin al-Tufi. He has a kitab called Al-Bulbul, which is a summary of Rawdatul al-Nadhir, which is called Mukhtasar al-Rawda. They summarize it, they call it Al-Bulbul. And ironically, these are some of the names or some of the ways that the scholars name books in ways that attract you. Bulbul means what? It's like a sparrow, a small bird. Rawdatul Nadhir is what? Rawda means what? Garden. Riyadul Salihin is what? Garden. Bustanul Arifin, again, garden, park. They name books in a way that attracts you. So a lot of the names are in that flow. So going back to the author himself, Abu Ma'ali al-Juwayni was an imam when it came to usul al-fiqh, no doubt about it. And the thing that specializes him in usul al-fiqh, he's not a person who's authored in usul al-fiqh just in a theory based. He actually implemented it. In his works in the Shafi'i madhab are recognized and valued. From it is the Kitab al-Nihaya, or Nihayat al-Matlab fi Dirayat al-Madhab. It's a book in the Shafi'i madhab, and it's relied upon. It's one of the big books of the Shafi'iyya. With him being an imam in usul al-fiqh and an imam in fiqh, he had mistakes when it came to names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He had mistakes. And he made several mistakes when it came to Allah's names and attributes. So he did go wrong. And he had other weaknesses. And some of the scholars, they say, he was very weak when it came to hadith. In his entire kitab of fiqh, which is meant to deal with legal rulings, he mentions one hadith. And that one hadith that he even mentions, he attributes it to Imam al-Bukhari, and it's not even in Bukhari. To show you the weakness of his understanding of hadith. And some of the scholars, they said, Abu Ma'ali al-Juwayni knew not much of hadith. From the 6 books of hadith, he hadn't memorized any of them. And the only one that he memorized was Sunan al-Darimi, and that's it. So his understanding of hadith was weak, but his understanding of usul al-fiqh was good. Now a question for everyone. If we know the author of the book has mistakes in Aqidah, why are we studying his book? Should we just close it and choose another book? Al-Usul min Ilm al-Usul by Ibn Uthaymeen, or another book whose imam or the person who's written the book is a person whose Aqidah is good. Why are we studying Al-Waraqaat? Should we skip it? Choose another book, put it on the table, start with it? Is it a problem that we're studying his book? No? Why?
Because it's not the science of Aqidah. And also like the ulama have sifted through it and they've understood. Recommend.
Essentially. Good. Yes, it might not be in the science of Aqidah. That does not stop you from taking the knowledge from it. And sometimes it should stop you from taking the knowledge from it. I'll give you an example. The Kitab Zamakhshari called Al-Kashaf, a book of tafsir, and he was a well-known Mu'tazili. And in his book is a book of tafsir. You might say, I'm just studying tafsir. His Arabic, his balagha, his lugha is very eloquent in that book. The way that he breaks down the Arabic language in the Quran is amazing. But then it's not good to study a book like that. Why? Because he hides his, as they say, poison in his speech. He hides his i'tizal in his own speech. And some of the scholars, they took the mistakes that he's done and they looked under a microscope and they sifted through. So a book like Al-Kashaf by Zamakhshari, don't read it. Al-Waraqat, yes, the Imam has mistakes, but the book generally is a book that does not have issues of aqidah in it. There's a few issues of aqidah that we will touch upon, like the issue of majaz in the Quran. Do metaphors exist in the Quran or not? The author establishes a certain viewpoint because he wants to further later on establish a viewpoint in aqidah. That's why he chooses that opinion. But we'll come and we'll touch upon those points inshallah ta'ala. But the book is a beginner's book on usul al-fiqh that almost every madhab chooses to start with. Whether you're Shafi'i, Hanbali, Maliki, Hanafi, almost every single person starts with Waraqat. And the Imam was what? Shafi'i. And this book has qabul, it's been accepted by the masses and the scholars. So the scholars advise with this book and that's why we start with it. And it's generally free from any mistakes. Clear? Any questions? Clear?
Is it better to start with this or something?
Both are good. The reason I chose this because it's more classical. Al-Usul min Ilm al-Usul is a very good book by Ibn Uthaymin. One of the benefits of that book is the ta'rifat are on point. The definitions that he chooses for certain things are very good. It's more classical, and once you know how to deal with this book, you're able to unlock different other books of Usul al-Fiqh and it makes it easy for you. So again, the best book to start with is what your teacher gives you. So you don't say what's the best book that I can study, or your teacher is going to tell you. You don't choose your book and you're not going to study it on YouTube or just by reading the book yourself anyways. So your teacher is going to tell you what the best book is. And I think this is probably the best book because this is what a lot of my teachers started with anyways. Good. Now another disclaimer that I forgot to mention is certain scholars do not like to teach the science before a person has a bit of a grasp of the Arabic language. Some of my teachers have asked them, can you teach me Waraqat? And they say no. Until we don't study Nahu, you can't teach Waraqat. I can't teach you. Because a lot of the chapters of this book, like the Dalalat al-Alfaz, the wordings and what each word indicates goes back to the Arabic language. So there's a lot of Arabic understanding or pre-understanding that is involved. And some of the scholars don't even like to teach a book like Waraqat, which is in Ulum al-Ala, in the English language or in any other language except Arabic. So they say, and there's an opinion of certain scholars, and it's a valid opinion, which is anything from the Ulum al-Ala. The sciences are of two parts, Ulum al-Ghaya and Ulum al-Ala or Wasail. Ulum al-Ghaya is what is the objective of the Sharia, and it's three sciences, Aqidah, Tafsir and Fiqh. Aqidah, Tafsir and Fiqh. And again, they're related, but these three sciences are what you want to learn. Why? Because that's the objective. You want to learn the Quran because the objective is to understand the Quran. You want to know Aqidah because the objective is to come with the correct Aqidah. You want to understand Fiqh because you want to worship Allah correctly. These are objective knowledge or objective sciences. Then there are sciences that are called Ulum al-Wasail, means. They help you reach the goals. So for example, An-Nahu, grammar, Ilm al-Qira'at, the science of recitation of the Quran. For example, Mustalah al-Hadith, Usul al-Fiqh, Usul al-Tafsir. These sciences, they help you and aid you reach a better understanding in these three sciences. And what are these called? Wasail. These are means. And the scholars, they say, anything that's a means, we don't teach it in the Arabic language, except in the Arabic. Some of the scholars, they say, but again, I find it to be a benefit in teaching it in the English language. And some of my teachers have taught it and taught Ulum al-Wasail in the English language. And again, to bring it about for the understanding of the people is good. I'm not going to say you're going to become an expert usuli by studying it in the English, but it's a key. It's an opening, inshallah ta'ala. Where was I? The book, right? Let's go back, inshallah ta'ala. So, before starting this book, there are what the scholars refer to as mabadi al-ashara. Inna mabadi kulla fannin ashara الحد والموضوع ثم الثمرة. There are 10 introductory points that scholars tend to go through before they start to deal with every single science. Meaning, if you want to study the science of Arabic language, the scholars generally go through 10 introductory points. We'll go through them inshallah ta'ala. And if you want to study Tawheed, 10 introductory points. It gives you an overview of the science. When you have an overview understanding of the science, the rest of the science becomes easy. So the first thing and only today what we'll do is we'll go through these 10 points inshallah ta'ala, and then we'll go through a overview of the book Al-Waraqaat, a summary of it, and we'll stop. We'll come back next week and then we'll take the next lesson, which is the beginning of the book inshallah ta'ala, which starts with the different types of rulings, ahkam, halal and haram and other things. So let's start with the 10 points. You can write it down. Number one. Number one is al-had. Al-had. Al-had means the definition. And in the Arabic language, the had is a border. And a definition, by definition, ironically, is something that should encompass everything that is a part of the meaning of that word. And anything that is not a part of the meaning should be excluded from the definition. And some of the scholars refer to this as jami' mani'. Comprehensive, meaning includes everything that is a part of the meaning in the definition. And mani', preventative. It prevents anything that is not a part of the meaning to stay out of the definition. And one of the things you'll notice about usul al-fiqh is the scholars really go hard when it comes to definitions. Definitions, sometimes you'll see a scholar 5-6 pages, all he's doing is trying to define a word. That's it. And it's, again, one of the reasons behind this is, and there's a history behind usul al-fiqh and how it developed, and we'll come to it shortly inshallah ta'ala. But a lot of ilm al-kalam and mantiq entered usul al-fiqh. Entered usul al-fiqh. So a lot of it became very intellectual ways of engaging with the definition, trying to choose and nitpick regarding definitions. In any case, going back to the topic, al-had. Al-had is what? The definition. What are we going to define? We're going to define the science itself, which is what? Usul al-fiqh. And later on when we start the book, the author is going to define it for us anyways. And as a benefit, any science that is comprised of 2 words, the scholars have 2 ways of defining it. So if like usul al-fiqh, this is the title of a science that comprises of how many words? 2. What's the first one? Usul. What's the second one? Fiqh. Who can give me another science that comprises of 2 words? Mustalah hadith. Good. Something else? Yeah, it's a wow, it's not 2 now. Huh? Usul al-tafsir, good. So 2 words, usul al-tafsir, usul al-fiqh, al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyya, mustalah hadith. 2 words, okay? When the scholars see a title of a science that has 2 words in it, they have 2 approaches of defining it. The first approach is to take the first word, define it. Take the second word, define it by themselves separately. Good? So they will take usul, define usul. They will take al-fiqh, define fiqh. That's it. Definition done. The second approach is to bring them together and say usul al-fiqh is 1 word and define it together as 1 compounded word. And that's what the author does in the book, and we'll come to it. For now, let's define it as a laqab, as a title, as 1 word, usul al-fiqh. Now, usul al-fiqh, as 1 word, the definition is a 3-part definition. Number 1 is ma'rifatu dalail al-fiqh ijmalan. Knowing the evidences of fiqh, jurisprudence, ijmalan, generically. Ma'rifatu dalail al-fiqh ijmalan. Knowing the evidences of jurisprudence, fiqh, generically, ijmalan, or holistically. That's the first part of the definition of the science. Number 2, وكيفية الاستفادة منها. And how do you benefit from those evidences? وكيفية الاستفادة منها. How do you benefit from those evidences? Number 3, وحال المستفيد. وحال المستفيد with a dal. And the situation of the one who is benefiting from those rulings. So again, I repeat. Number 1, what is it? معرفة دلائل الفقه إجمالا. Knowing the general evidences of fiqh. Number 2, كيفية الاستفادة منها. How to benefit from it. Number 3, حال المستفيد is who can benefit from it. Now, the science of usul al-fiqh is very simple. It's number 1 to establish what is an evidence. That's it. That's the first part. Establishing what can be used as an evidence in the Sharia. Somebody wants to give you a ruling in Islam, a legal verdict. What can they use as an evidence? Can they say, I saw in my dream X, Y, and Z, and that's an evidence? Halal, do it. Can they say that? Or I think, and my feeling is, you should be able to do this. Can they do that? No. It's based on Islamic evidence. So what constitutes as an Islamic evidence? That's the first discussion and the part of the definition of usul al-fiqh. Is knowing what is a evidence of fiqh ijmalan. Now ijmalan is different than the word tafsilan. When you come to define the word fiqh, you say معرفة دلائل الفقه التفصيلي or الطلبي. Different words you can define it with, but you take the detailed evidences. Now what's the difference between a detailed evidence and a holistic evidence? Example. If I say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says salah is obligatory, and my evidence is وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ, establish the salah. I've just quoted an ayah to you. That ayah is a specific evidence. Good? Clear? Or if I say every action requires an intention, and my evidence is إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ, actions are based on intention. The hadith that I've quoted you is what? A specific evidence. We don't deal with that in usul al-fiqh. What do we deal with in usul al-fiqh is a general evidence. Looking at the Quran and the hadith and saying, is the Quran an evidence in establishing rulings, yes or no? Is the hadith an evidence in establishing rulings, yes or no? Is ijma', consensus, a evidence in establishing rulings, yes or no? We look at the category of evidence generally. We're not looking at specific evidences. Clear? Is everybody with me? Okay. I'm going to give you an evidence. I want you to tell me whether it's a specific evidence or a general evidence. Okay? Bismillah. So I'm going to say the ayah in the Quran. قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Is it a general evidence or a specific evidence? Specific evidence. Where is it dealt with? Usul al-fiqh or fiqh? Fiqh. Good. If I say qiyas, analogy, the category of evidence which is analogy, is that general evidence or specific evidence? General. Where is it dealt with? Fiqh or usul al-fiqh? Usul al-fiqh. Good. If I say the statement of a companion, is it an evidence or not? General. I haven't mentioned the statement of a companion. I'm referring to just the statement itself, the category of a statement of a companion. Good? If I say Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, he said, إِذَا أَمْسَيْتَ فَلَا تَنْتَظِرِ الْمَسَاءِ وَإِذَا أَصْبَحْتَ فَلَا تَنْتَظِرِ الصَّبَاحِ. I've quoted you Ibn Umar, a companion. What is that? That is specific evidence. Where is that looked into? Fiqh. If I say, can we use the legislation of those who came before us, like the Jews and the Christians, شَرْعُ مَنْ قَبْلَنَا, as an evidence? General. If I say al-istishab, which is a type of evidence, and we'll come to it in more detail, which is the remaining of something on its original essence. Now this category of evidence, is it general or specific? General. I haven't given you a specific example of it. If I say the statement of the people of Medina, قَوْلِ أَهْلِ Medina, is it a general evidence or a specific evidence? General. So now you've distinguished between what is a general evidence and what is a specific evidence. A specific is when I quote you the ayah or the hadith or give you the ijma' by itself. But if I speak about the general category of the evidence, what am I speaking about? General evidences dealt with usul al-fiqh. Clear? So the first part of usul al-fiqh is what? Knowing what is a evidence in the sharia, generally, as a category. Can we use hadith? Can we use Quran? Can we use qiyas? Can we use ijma'? As a side benefit, there are evidences that are agreed upon, and there are 4. And the rest of it are evidences that are differed upon. The first evidence that is agreed upon that you can use to establish rulings agreed upon in usul al-fiqh by the different madahib is the Quran. Nobody differs regarding the legitimacy of using the Quran as an evidence. Nobody argues about it. Or the hadith, or ijma', consensus, or qiyas, analogy. Nobody differs. Then there are evidences that are differed upon, and we'll come to them inshallah ta'ala as we go through the book. But that's the first part of the definition. Clear? Good. Second part of the definition is what? كيفية الاستفادة منها. How, now I've established what can be used as an evidence. Yes. But how do I now extract the ruling from the evidence and give you a halal, haram, allowed, not allowed, permissible, impermissible? From the evidence, how do I extract? The process of extracting and deriving the ruling. That is what is dealt with in the science as well. So from the things that we will see is, how do we know when Allah is commanding us to do something? How do we know this is a command? Meaning it's a serious command, it's wajib, you have to do it. And how do we know it's a command that is imposed upon us, but not forcefully? It's recommended, if you want, it's better for you. How do we distinguish between that? And if something is commanded to us, and we say it's wajib, do we have to do it right away? Meaning, Allah said, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ, establish the salah, right? Do you have to pray the salah right away? Huh? When the time comes, right away? We'll come to it inshallah. Okay? And if Allah commands us to do something and we don't do it, what's upon us and what happens to us? Are we sinful? Are we not sinful? All of that we'll discuss. But this looks at what? Commands and prohibitions. The biggest chapter of deriving rulings is the commands and the prohibitions. Al-awamir wal-nawahi. That's it. That's really what it revolves around. But there's other things that are in this chapter. How do we know something in the Quran is general? Is aam, general. How do we know? There's several ways of knowing. For example, Allah says, وَأَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى. Allah has made al-bay' halal. Buying halal. And what type of buying has Allah made halal? All types? Huh? A lot of types or all types of them already? A lot of types. Huh?
So it depends on what you're buying.
Depends on what you're buying. So when Allah in the ayah itself, Allah has made al-bay', buying permissible. What's included in the ayah? Which buying is Allah referring to?
General.
Huh?
General buying.
Also all of buying.
No, it's general. Because it's general, it was for the ayah comes out. It's general.
That's the concept of al-umum wal-khusus, general and specific. And then you have other concepts as well, other dalalat as well, and we'll come to it one by one inshallah ta'ala, like khas and aam, specific, general, which we mentioned, al-mutlaq and al-muqayyad, restricted, unrestricted, and different ways. We have what is uttered, mantuq, we have the mafhum, the opposite understanding of it. If I say to everybody, sit down, what is the thing that you understand from it? Don't stand up. You've understood it. Can that apply to the statement of Allah and the speech of Allah? If Allah commands us with something, can we understand an implication from it and apply it to rulings or not? We'll come to all of that. So all of that is called what? كيفية الاستفادة منها. How do you benefit from the evidence that is in front of you? You should be, by the end of the book, inshallah ta'ala, I should be able to give you an evidence and you should be able to recognize patterns in the evidence. You can say there's a generality, that word is general. That part of the word specifies it. Or that word there, it shows you prohibition. Or that word there shows you that it's wajib. You should be able to understand the ayah from a perspective of deriving rulings from it. Make sense? That's the second part of the definition. The third part of the definition is what? Hal al-Mustafid. Hal al-Mustafid is, and by the way, the second part, it's like tools. It's like a person having a number of tools in their disposal in order to extract rulings. We'll go through these tools themselves. The last one is Hal al-Mustafid. Who is a person that is qualified to extract the rulings? Meaning, if you, like I mentioned, if you study this book and somebody else studies this book, are you qualified to derive rulings? So what are the conditions of the person who is qualified? It's called Hal al-Mustafid. And this is the Shurut al-Musti wal-Mustafti. The conditions of the one who's giving fatwa and the one who's receiving fatwa, and the Mujtahid, who is the one who has independent reasoning. There's conditions and qualifications and standards that the scholars have said for that person. All of that is discussed. Clear? So that is the Usul al-Fiqh. So this definition of Usul al-Fiqh as a benefit is the definition of Imam al-Baydawi in his kitab Minhaj. The definition of Imam al-Baydawi. And it's generally a good definition, and some scholars prefer other definitions. But this gives you understanding of the entire science and what's a part of the science and what the science discusses. Three things. What is an evidence? How to extract rulings from the evidence? Who is qualified to extract the rulings? Clear? Good. So al-had, that's the first introductory point. Number two, al-mawdu', the subject matter. Al-mawdu', the subject matter. Now, anything and everything has a subject matter. If I say, for example, the subject matter of medicine, the science of medicine, what do they work on? Medicine is a science. What do they work on? What are they dealing with? The bodies, human body, anatomy. That's what they deal with, right? That's the human body that they deal with. Or, for example, if I say an engineer, what does he work on? Machines. If I say what do you call the guy who, the person who works on the eyes, the eye doctor, optician. What's his subject matter? Eyes. So everything has a subject matter. The scholars of Usul al-Fiqh, what's their subject matters? What do they deal with? What do they interact with? Fiqh? Evidences. So they deal with evidences. Dala'il al-Shar'iyya. The evidences of the Sharia that allows you to reach al-Musilati ila al-Ahkam. That allow you to reach the rulings. So their subject matter is what? Evidences. That's what they deal with and that's what they interact with. Number three, al-Thamara. Thamara is the benefit. The benefit. What's the fruits of learning the science? When I learn the science, what do I get out of it? What do I get out of it? The thamara is what? What will you get out of it? So by the end of this book, what's the benefit for you?
Do we know if someone's trying to give us a ruling, if they applied that ruling correctly?
Ahsant, very good. What else?
What makes an evidence?
Good.
Can become Muslim.
Become?
Become Muslim.
Mufti.
Yeah.
No, for the sake of Allah. No. Jamil. It is to know when a ruling is extracted, whether it's extracted correctly or not, based on the correct principles or not. That's what you benefit. You will recognize if somebody has used an evidence correctly or not. And even though I haven't mentioned it, when it comes to using an evidence or using or bringing about a ruling, there's two parts involved. First thing that you need to have is a nas musaddaq. Is a nas musaddaq, a authentic textual evidence. Establishing something is an authentic textual evidence. And generally the Quran is authentic, we don't need to establish it. But when it comes to the hadith, this is dealt in the science of what? Mustalah al-hadith. The second thing that you're required to establish is what is called bahth al-muhaqqaq, a relationship between the outcome you bring about and the evidence itself, the relationship. And if you don't have that relationship, the outcome is flawed. And where is that and what is that dealt with? Usul al-Fiqh. I'll give you an example to understand. If somebody says you are allowed to celebrate the Mawlid of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you're allowed. And you say, what's your evidence? He says, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Now which part has he got right? The first part. Is the evidence authentic? Of course, the Quran, you can't debate with the Quran, it's authentic. What's wrong in what he did? It's the outcome and the evidence is used. There is no link between them. Make sense? Or if, for example, if somebody says you can't celebrate the Mawlid, and then you say, what's your evidence? And they say, لَيْسَ مِنَّا مَنْ لَمْ يَحْتَفِلْ بِالْمَوْلِد. The person is not from us who does not celebrate the Mawlid. Where have they gone wrong? The evidence. The evidence itself is not authentic. We brought you again, this is a fabricated hadith, it's not an authentic hadith. I've made it up. But it's not an authentic hadith. So the evidence itself is weak. So usul al-fiqh deals with what? Once the evidence is authentic, how do I derive the ruling from it? Okay? So the thamara is what? The benefit is what? Once you study the science, you're able to understand what kind of deriving of ruling is correct and what is wrong. When have they made a mistake in the way they derive? Again, the example I gave you is easy, right? If somebody says you can celebrate the Mawlid and says, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Everybody here knows that's not the right way of deriving the ruling. It doesn't make sense. But some things a bit more complicated than that. So that is number 3. Number 4 is al-wadi'. Al-wadi'. Al-wadi' is the one who placed the science, who initiated the science. So who started the science? Imam Shafi'i. So before Imam Shafi'i, the science didn't exist.
No, but it wasn't written. But it was written.
Ahsant. So if Imam Shafi'i started the science, does this mean people before him were not using the science? No. So this science was present at the time of the companions. The companions, did they know usul al-fiqh? They knew it to the best of their abilities, in the best possible way. But they never knew it as a science. They knew it instinctively, naturally. They knew the science, they could implement it. Just like tajweed. Did the Sahabas know ahkam al-nun sakina wa tanween? If you can say idgham and idhar, no. They knew it naturally. Did they knew nahu, Arabic grammar? Is this word marfu or majrur? Did they know it? No. They knew it naturally. So all of the science for the companions was in natural, they knew it already. Later on, as time developed, when things became hard and people find it hard and they went further away from the revelation, they needed to now set it down as a science. So people can study it and people can implement it. Okay? So this science was present at the time of the companions, after, throughout. But it was only codified and written down as a science when? By Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala. And that's why Al-Amriti is one of the people who's written poetry regarding Al-Waraqaat. What did he say? أول من صنف في الكتب الحمد لله الذي أظهر علم الأصول للورى وأشهر على لسان الشافعي ودونه. Imam al-Shafi'i was the first one to write down the science. So before Imam al-Shafi'i, the science existed or not? It did. Who was the first one to actually write it down? Imam al-Shafi'i. It's the first person to author it. So even in his time it existed, but he's the one who chose, you know what, I'm going to write it down as a science. I'm going to compile it, I'm going to make it into a subject. Make sense? Fourth one, the wadi'? No, it's the Imam Shafi'i. Because the wadi' means the one who codified it, not the one who introduced it. The science was known by the Sahaba.
So what was the third introductory point called?
Thamara, the benefit, or the fruits of the science. So what's the benefit of learning the science? So we've done number 4. Number 5, istimdad. Istimdad means where is this science brought from or extracted? Or you can say, an istimdad is like leaning onto something. Does this science lean on something in order for it to function? Does it need another science for it to function? And if so, what is the other science that it requires for it to function?
Question.
Huh?
Can it be more than one?
Yes.
So, can I answer?
Uh,
The language, Arabic language.
Ahsan. Good. So the first one it relies on is the Quran and the Sunnah. Quran and the Sunnah are evidences, and the Usul al-Fiqh relies on the Quran and the Sunnah. Usul al-Fiqh doesn't teach you Quran and Sunnah. It relies and needs Quran and Sunnah to function. Likewise, the ijma' of the Salaf. The Usul al-Fiqh, and a lot of the times we say, when you're asked, what madhab or what's your manhaj, what do we say? Quran and the Sunnah upon the understanding of the Salaf. This understanding of the Salaf is Usul al-Fiqh. So if you want to understand Usul al-Fiqh, whose principles do you want to understand in accordance to? The Sahabas. So the Usul al-Fiqh you want to use and learn, whose Usul al-Fiqh do you want? The Usul al-Fiqh of somebody who came later on, or the Usul al-Fiqh of the Sahabas? Usul al-Fiqh of the Sahabas. And that is called the understanding of the Salaf. So it relies on the understanding of the Salaf. So these rulings and some of these things, the Sahabas they agreed upon. The Sahabas agreed upon that the command shows you obligation, that's it. It's an ijma' of the Salaf. Okay? Now, and the next thing it relies upon is the Arabic language. Usul al-Fiqh is not going to teach you the language. It's going to use principles that already exist in the language and lean on it and use it to function. Okay? And also, Usul al-Din, Aqidah issues. Issues related to Aqidah, it already is leaning on it and it's not introducing it as a new concept. Example, even the concept of the Quran, is it a hujjah or not? It relies on what? You believing the Quran is from Allah. And if the Quran is from Allah, it's a hujjah. It's an issue of aqidah from that angle. So it relies on a lot of different sciences in order for it to function. This is called istimdad. Istimdad. The things that it relies, or the other subject it relies on, or it borrows in order to function. Number 6, and we'll keep it at 6, and some scholars mention 10, but we'll stick to 6 inshallah ta'ala, and we can do 10. Let me see if this. We'll come to the other ones, inshallah ta'ala. Some of them are similar. Thamara and fadlu. Fadlu means the virtue of it, the benefit of learning, and then thamara is similar. So we'll stick to these 6 inshallah ta'ala. The last one is hukmu ta'allumi. Hukmuhu. What's the ruling of studying the science? Does every Muslim need to know it? Or a few people need to know it? Fard kifaya. And never is going to be a fard ayn.
I would say every Muslim should know it.
Every Muslim should know it. And if not, then they're sinful?
No, if possession of knowledge is the rightful possession of the believer.
Yeah.
That's why all Muslims should try to learn it.
From a voluntary perspective, from an obligation perspective, can we say it's obligatory upon every Muslim? No. Good. So it's obligatory upon certain people in the community. If there's a community and nobody knows the science and nobody knows how to give rulings, then everybody is sinful. But so some people definitely need to know it. The rest of it, you can say, yes, it's recommended and it's better for them to know it so they can understand the religion, but it's not obligatory. So the scholars, they say it's fardu kifaya ala al-ummah. It's a communal obligation upon the whole ummah. There must be somebody from the Muslim ummah who knows this science. Otherwise, everybody is sinful. And some of the scholars, they say it's fardu aynin ala al-mujtahid. It is a individual obligation on the mujtahid. And here there's a question mark. Okay, I don't want to say it's a fardu ayn on the mujtahid because he only reaches ijtihad once he knows usul al-fiqh. Okay, so there's a bit of a question mark, but some scholars say it's a fardu ayn on the mujtahid. What you can say, what is better to say, it's fardu ayn ala al-mufti. The one who's going to give rulings, he has to know it. Okay, and some scholars say not really. He doesn't need to know it, and he can give, without satisfying the conditions of al-mujtahid, he can still give rulings. In any case, we'll come to that later inshallah. But generally, what's the ruling of learning the science? Communal obligation. Somebody in the community needs to know it, not everybody. Not everybody. Jamil. So, any questions so far?
Assalamu alaikum. What was the manzuma you mentioned about the Waraqaat?
Al-Amriti.
Al-Amriti.
Amriti. He's a Shafi'i scholar. he has a نظم called تسهيل الطرقات في نظم الورقات. You have other poetry of Waraqat as well. This book has 100 explanations. 100 explanations. And one of the good poetries of the book itself, not the book but the science itself, is called مراحل الصعود لمبتغي الرقي والصعود. 1,000 roughly lines of poetry. It's an alfiya written by Abdullah ibn Hajj Shinqiti rahimahullah ta'ala. 1,000 lines of poetry. But it's more than, it's waraqat and more, it's advanced. Now. And as a side benefit, the best explanation of the Kitab al-Waraqat is the explanation of Jalaluddin al-Mahalli. Jalaluddin al-Mahalli has the best explanation of this book. It's a bit of an advanced explanation, so I wouldn't recommend you go back to it at the first instance, but eventually work your way to it. The explanation of who? Jalaluddin al-Mahalli. And there were two Jalaluddin. Jalaluddin al-Mahalli and Jalaluddin al-Suyuti. And that's why the tafsir of Jalalayn is what? Written by both. One of them wrote it, and then he died, he didn't finish it, and the other one completed it. And it's called Tafsir al-Jalalayn. I think the first one he finished at the Surah al-An'am, and then from An'am to the end of it. I don't know which one did which one, but both of them, they contributed to writing that tafsir. So not Jalaluddin al-Suyuti, Jalaluddin al-Mahalli's sharh on this book, with the hashiyah of al-Damyati. Al-Damyati is a Shafi'i scholar. He has a hashiyah, footnotes with it. That's the best one, inshallah ta'ala. And there's many other explanations. If you want to pick up a beginner explanation, I recommend this explanation of Sheikh Abdullah al-Fawzan. Very beginning, easy explanation, basic and very understandable as well. Not Salih al-Fawzan, Abdullah al-Fawzan. نعم تفضل.
Imam Shafi'i's Risala, is that from the advanced books of Usul al-Fiqh?
Yes, it's Usul al-Fiqh, and it's not just Usul al-Fiqh. That's when he wrote Usul al-Fiqh, but there's a lot of other elements in it. He touches upon Mustalah al-Hadith and other topics as well. No. And it's, again, don't bring yourself down and say everything is advanced. No, work your way to it, inshallah. It's not that advanced, inshallah.
Could you repeat the names of the 6 introductory points?
Yes, no problem. So the first one is had, the definition of the science. Number 2, al-mawdu', the subject matter of that science, what it deals with. Number 3, thamara, the fruit or the benefit of learning that science. Number 4, wadi', the one who introduced the science or compiled it or codified it. Number 5, istimdad, the different other sciences that this science borrows from or leans on. And number 7, hukum, learning the science. And so we wrote 6, there are 10. If you want the rest of the 10,
just up to 6.
yeah, we only did 6, but there are 10 other points. Some of the scholars, they discuss it as well, but some of those 10 are similar, like sharaf and fadl and thamara, it's really the same, similar. And then they say masail. Masail are it's similar to the subject matter itself. So the different topics in the issue.
The author is Abdul Malik.
Abu Ma'ali Juwani Abdul Malik Ibn, what was his second name? Ibn Abdullah Ibn Yousaf. His name is Abdul Malik. And he is, he's called Abu Ma'ali, and that's his kunya. Abu Ma'ali al-Juwayni is an attribution to a place called Juwayn in Naysabur, which is somewhere near Uzbekistan today. I don't know if it's a city that still exists or not, but Naysabur used to be a city back in the day. I think it's a city today, right? It might be a city today actually. Khair, inshallah. So those are the 10, or we took 6 introductory points. Now the next thing I want to do, inshallah ta'ala, is give you a summary of it. Even though we've already done it, I'll just give you a quick summary of it. The different subject matters that the book deals with, and we've already covered it in the hadith, the definition of usul al-fiqh. Those 3-part definition covers an overview of what is in waraqat. there's a fourth additional point as well, which is not a part of the definition, rather it's an outcome of usul al-fiqh, which is called al-hukm or al-madlul. Al-madlul or hukum. So the first part of this book will speak about hukum, ahkam. And there are 5 main rulings in the Sharia. Who knows them? Everybody.
Wajib, mustahab, mubah, makruh, haram.
Ahsant. These are the 5 rulings in the Sharia. We'll come to it in more detail. Haram means impermissible. Mustahab or mandub or sunnah means what? Recommended. Mubah means permissible, and you can say jaiz. Then you have makruh, disliked. And then haram, prohibited or impermissible. These are the 5. Now these 5 things are not really a part of usul al-fiqh. What are they? They're the outcome. You study usul al-fiqh so you can reach the point of saying this is permissible, this is not, this is allowed. These are the outcomes of usul al-fiqh. Why does the author bring it in the very beginning? He brings it because you need to understand what's the objective of usul al-fiqh. You're studying the book, why? To reach the objective. He brings you the objective at the very beginning of the book. So we go in first topic, before that actually, and the first topic really is defining the word usul and fiqh. And we might even spend half of next lesson just defining usul al-fiqh. Then the rulings in the Sharia, and these are the 5 main ones. There are other 2 that he adds as well. Who knows what they are? Sahih and batil or fasid? Sahih and fasid or batil? Correct and incorrect. He brings this as well. And these 2 are in a separate category, and we'll come to it inshallah. And we'll argue as to why he included it in one category, because he actually brings it as one category. Other scholars divide them into 5 and 2, and other scholars not only keep it 2, they add other two more to this as well. Okay, shart and mani, and they come bring other ones, and we'll come to that discussion. But the first discussion of waraqat after the definition of usul al-fiqh is what? Rulings. Clear? The second discussion is dalil. And again, this is not in a particular order. Sometimes it goes back and forth. But the second discussion is dalil. Evidences. And we already gave you evidences. The evidences that are agreed upon are how many? 4. What's the first one? Quran. Yes. Good. And then there are evidences that are differed upon. Example? The qawl of Ahl Medina, the statement of the people of Medina. Is it an evidence or not? Madhab al-Sahabi. Some scholars say qawl and some say madhab. Madhab is more accurate. Why? Madhab includes qawl and fa'al as well. So the madhab of a Sahabi. If we find a statement of Abu Hurairah, can we use it as an evidence? We'll come to that discussion. If we find a statement of Abu Bakr regarding a matter, or even an action of Abu Bakr, can that be an evidence in our Sharia? We'll come to that discussion. But these evidences are what? Differed upon. Next evidence, who can give an example? Huh? Aql? Taqbih and tahseen, yeah, part of it. Istihsan they call it, which is a part of it now. Is what, not logically, but it's using the level of your intellect. We have something called the masalih al-mursala, right? Masalih al-mursala are things that are, clearly there's a benefit in it, but the Sharia never said there's halal or haram. Example, we know that traffic lights in the country, and parking signs and road signs, and going left and going right, these signs in the country, there's a benefit, right? Is it allowed for us to have road signs and traffic signs in the country and traffic lights? What's the evidence from the Quran and the Sunnah?
I can't remember that deeply. Something, if anything religious is automatically haram, and that's proven otherwise, and anything that isn't religious.
But I want a specific evidence regarding traffic signs.
Oh,
That's true, but that doesn't really prove the point. I want an evidence showing traffic signs or traffic lights or road signs and going left and going right, or even the concept of owning a driving license. You don't have an evidence. But clearly, if we didn't have this, the death rates in the country will be more. And clearly there's a maslahah, there's a benefit in having these road signs and a systematic order in the way things work. This is referred to as a maslaha mursala. We'll come to it. Can we, if something we see in a benefit in the community, even though we don't have a clear evidence from the Quran and the Sunnah, can we say it's allowed just because there's a benefit? We'll come to it inshallah. نعم تفضل.
mentioned the Yasir's agreed upon, not some of the madhab.
It's not some of the madhahib. Four madhahib agree upon it. The Zahiri madhab rejects it. And their qawl is not mu'tabar. It's not taken into consideration. Huh? How do you? Okay, clear? Okay, so we're going to establish what is an evidence and what is not an evidence. Then we said what? What's the third part? We're going to find it in Waraqaat. Before حال المستفيد. كيفية الاستفادة منها, which is called الدلالة, or sometimes we refer to it as what? طرق الاستنباط, the ways of extracting a ruling. So, what do we say? We said وجه الدلالة, we call it, right? The way of extracting and the perspective of extracting the evidence. Again, all of this deals with what? This word is general, this word is specific, this word is a command, this word is a prohibition, this word is restricted, this word is unrestricted, this is a clear statement, this is the opposite understanding. All of those evidences that we see from the different, all of those indications we see from the evidences. The last one is mustafid, which is hal mustafid, or the shurut of the mufti and mustafti, or the mujtahid. What do they speak about in this section? Is they speak about who is qualified to give Islamic rulings. And the scholars will discuss a number of issues. The one who's giving an Islamic ruling, does he have to memorize the whole Quran? Or does he have to memorize a certain portion of the Quran? And if he memorizes the whole Quran, does he have to come with all of the 10 qira'at? And if he memorizes a portion of the Quran, what's the minimum portion? Some of them, they say it's the ayatul ahkam. There are rulings or the verses in the Quran that pertain to the rulings. How many are they? There's a difference. Some say 300, some say 400, some say 1,000. There's a difference of opinion. When it comes to the Arabic language, knowing Arabic grammar, how much of Arabic should you know? Should you be a mujtahid like Sibawayh in the Arabic? Or do you just need to know the Arabic language enough to manage and understand the verses? All of this is discussed in what? The section of Halul Mustafid. There is on other sections related to it as well. Like at-ta'arud wa-tarjih, is naturally you will find evidences in the Quran and the Sunnah that sometimes appear to have a contradiction. One hadith says this, one hadith says this. So which one do we take? Example. The Prophet ﷺ, there's a hadith mentioned from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, that the Prophet ﷺ, he married his wife Maymuna whilst he was in the state of ihram. زوج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ميمونة وهو محرم, Ibn Abbas said. He married Maymuna in the state of ihram. And why is this problematic? No. Yeah, when you're in the state of ihram, you're not allowed to get married. So once you do your intention, you're not allowed to get married. You're not allowed to take your nails, you're not allowed to take your hair, you're not allowed to get married. So Ibn Abbas said the Prophet married Maymuna whilst he is in the state of ihram. So there's a contradiction. And then we have Maymuna's own statement. Maymuna, the wife of the Prophet, herself, she said, the Prophet married me and he was not in the state of ihram. So look, two evidences. What do we take? And both of them are authentic. This is called ta'arud and tarjih. Conflict, and how do we resolve this conflict? You'll find sometimes in one issue there's 5 different opinions and all of them contradict. Or 5 different evidences and they contradict one another. How do you resolve the conflict between these evidences? There's a whole section that deals with it, inshallah ta'ala. And there's other small topics as well that we'll come across in Waraqaat. But generally, the topics of Waraqaat are 4. Hukum, Dalil, Hal al-Mustafid, Dalala, Turuq al-Istinbat. These 4. What is an Islamic ruling? How do you extract the ruling? Who is capable of extracting the ruling? And the final outcome, which is the hukum, the outcome. Halal, haram, and other things related to it. This is all we'll find in this book, inshallah ta'ala. We'll stop here, inshallah ta'ala. I don't want to overload you with information. Next week, inshallah ta'ala, we'll start the book from the very beginning from the statement of the author, inshallah ta'ala. Any questions? Anything you don't understand? Clear? Inshallah.
When you mentioned that someone's called not take a Tesla, when you said there was a Jabba 4 over there, what are you talking about?
At the Zahiri madhab.
Zahiriya.
Yeah, Zahiriya. They don't believe in qiyas. For them, qiyas is not hujjah. And their opinion, even though they consider it to be the fifth madhab of Islam, is not the opinion that is considered. Inshallah ta'ala, we'll stop here for now. Barakallahu fikum for time. Anything good that I said is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any mistakes, any shortcomings, any errors is from me. And shaitan, subhanaka Allahumma bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruhu wa atubu ilayh. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.